Recently, my son asked me a very important and serious question. He said, "Dad, can a boy marry a boy?" The first thing I did was respond by inquiring, "Why are you asking?" And he said, "Well, a boy asked another boy in his class to marry him." And then he stopped for a second and matter-of-factly added, "And they really love each other." Well, he patiently waited for me to respond. What he didn't know is my head was swimming. I was trying to figure out, almost in an absurdly calculated way, what would be the impact of my answer in terms of the choices that he would make with respect to who he loved in the future. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a person of color, and I know the sting of discrimination and exclusion. My parents were compelled to leave South Africa because of apartheid. But when I received that question, I realized something, that accepting something or embracing it in the abstract is not the same thing as dealing with it in terms of the decisions and the actions that are real life. Well, I really was sort of stumped, and I struggled to figure out what to say. So, it made me realize something about diversity. Diversity is an extremely difficult thing to understand, particularly when you're talking to a 5-year-old. Well, I had this point where I had to say something, but I really didn't know what to do. And it made me realize that I don't have necessarily all of the answers, that I struggle just like anyone else to deal with things that I take for granted, that I believe, but at the same time, that when you push me and prod me, I'm not sure about. You see, when you actually start to interrogate different perspectives, including your own, you're taking a risk. You're taking a leap of faith, and you can't control the outcome. And there lies both the beauty and the challenge of embracing diversity. Well, I felt that disdain. I had to say something, but I still didn't know what to do. And there I thought again, oh my life has been such an interesting kind of conundrum. I've often thought that diversity was about difference, recognizing that we came from different histories, different cultures, that we experience different struggles. But the older I get, the more I realize that it's not really about difference as much as it's about commonality. The extent to which we're all human to a certain degree, and the real secret, the real challenge is trying to find a way to reach out to all of us, to make us understand that there's something that we have in common despite all of our differences. Take, for example, the tragic and the divisive and the controversial case of Trayvon Martin. We all know by now the basic details. An African-American youth shot and killed, armed with nothing more than Skittles and a soft drink. And you know, what's frustrating about what happened is the extent to which, obviously, it inflamed racial tensions, not only in Florida, but in the country. Yet, the thing that I feel is missing is the common sense reality of something that that you, me, everyone, I think, can relate to. The idea of love, of loving someone. So if you will, imagine waiting, looking out the window for someone you care about who is inexplicably late, hasn't contacted you, and is actually perhaps even missing. You hear the jingling of the keys, your heart beats, the door doesn't open, and then imagine, if you will, the news, this horrible, unimaginable news, that person is never coming home. Now I ask you, I challenge you to tell me that you can only relate to that if you're black. So, what is it about the transformational power of diversity? To me, it's about the reality that you have to accept something inside of you that you can relate to others. That difference should be celebrated, and we certainly celebrate it a lot, but that there's something more to difference. It has to lead to something that's greater than our individual selves. Now, I'm going to put my dean's hat on for a moment, and I'm going to tell you that I'm not particularly impressed with the way that higher education does learning of diversity. And I'm going to tell you why. A, I don't think we've really gotten beyond understanding the appreciation of diversity. But the truth be told, I think that really what's happening is we like to celebrate it, we like to acknowledge it, but embracing diversity requires, as I said before, taking a risk. And when you're learning about it, you have to basically take a chance and say to yourselves, I'm going to openly and honestly tell and explain my beliefs and my values. And I'm also going to give you an opportunity to challenge them. And I think what's very, very difficult when you actually open yourself up to this is you're not sure what's going to happen. You can't control the outcome. Well, I'd like to relay a story to you because I was a first-year assistant professor, and of course, as a faculty of color, I taught every single diversity course there was on the face of the catalog. I don't know why. It must have been a coincidence. But I'll never forget my first course. There was a large, I would call him mature, somewhat imposing white man. His name was Luke. And he sat in the corner of my class of around 16, and he never said anything. Now, he wasn't mean. He didn't give me aggressive looks. He gave me kind of quizzical looks, like maybe he didn't understand what I was saying. But for 3 weeks, he said nothing. And then one day, we were having a really great class discussion, and all of a sudden, he shot up his hand. And before I even could call on him, he got up. Everyone looked around. They were shocked. And he said, almost kind of like, seriously, I'm a Republican. And I'm not ashamed to say it. What was interesting is there was a young African-American man sitting beside him, and he shot up and he said, "You go, Luke!" Now, you might think, what is that? It's a little comical moment. It's sweet. It's cute. No, actually, the conversation afterward was the best that I possibly ever had in my class. The intellectual exchange, the emotions, the challenges, the questions, all of it was wonderful, and I really think it's probably one of my proudest moments as an educator. And that brings me full circle back to that question that my son asked me, and I'm going to share with you what I said. I'm going to admit, first and foremost, that I actually answered it terribly at the beginning. I said, and then I thought, the more serious I sound, probably the more he'll just sort of get bored. So I said, son, families, and even traditions, religions, and even governments, they don't always approve of a marriage that involves a boy and a boy. Thankfully, my son quickly interrupted me, and he said, Dad, you love Mom, right? And you're married. And with that small, quick intervention, all of a sudden I had clarity. And I started again. And I said, son, in a world that's hard and it's lonely and there's a struggle often in one's life, if you can find someone that loves and respects you, that's all that really matters. It's a blessing. Because in this world, if you don't have love, you don't have understanding. And that's not the kind of world I want you or your sister to live in. He gave me this funny, quizzical look. You know the kind of look that kids give you, all right? You know that look. It sort of resides somewhere between the profound and the absurd. And then I thought, oh my God, he's going to ask me another question. And I could see it building up. And he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, Dad, do lions eat cobras? Well, I don't know in the long run whether they've affected him at all, whether the choices that he'll make, will really have some effect on the way that he chooses to love and who he chooses to love. But I know one thing for a fact. I know that he changed me forever in terms of something I learned as a father, as a person of color, as a husband, as an educator. The common sense of diversity is about embracing our humanity. And it's hard work. Very, very hard work. It's not just about talking the talk. You got to walk it too. And it also has to sort of take into consideration that there are going to be lots of times that you can't even meet your own expectations, let alone the expectations of others. But the one thing I know for certain is that the idea of love is always worth taking a risk for. And that understanding is a waste of time if it's not shared with others. And I'm eternally grateful for my son for teaching me these lessons.